Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Ghila Sanders, and on behalf of the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, I am delighted to welcome all of you to Community Conversations. The mission of the Atlanta Jewish Foundation is helping community realize its vision for giving now and for generations to come. And with this in mind, we designed our new shared learning series, Community Conversations, as a platform to bring together organizations that do amazing work in the community and community members who want to learn more, get engaged, and support their efforts. Today, we are here to talk about mental health and well-being and connect some of the most innovative local organizations and their inspiring leaders. Needless to say, we have a very short time together and we will only be able to scratch the surface, but we're hoping that this will be just a jumping start and we will follow up with opportunities to stay connected. I also want to mention that we have a number of other incredible organizations in the room. So please, when we break into smaller groups, take a minute to introduce yourselves and each other and learn who's around you, because we have incredible people up front, but we will also have incredible people all around. In 2020, as a response to COVID-19, a group of passionate philanthropists came together to determine how we could emerge from the pandemic stronger together. And so to support this, the Atlanta Jewish Foundation launched the Atlanta Jewish Funder Collaborative, which identified mental health and well-being as a key priority. Out of that, the group of philanthropists together funded a research project interviewing both Jewish organizations and secular organizations to understand the scope of needs, potential partnerships, and existing resources available. So you will hear about those findings in just a minute. There will be plenty of introductions today, and I want to start with three. The first one is our moderator, Dr. Stephanie Walsh, Director of Wellness at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Rabbi Schusterman of Jeff's Place, over there, who will help us frame the topic through a Jewish lens, and Faye Dresner, community leader and strategist, who I'd like to welcome here right now to introduce the work of the Funder Collaborative and the study it produced. Thank you.
I love that I can walk into this room and see so many familiar faces. It's like, you know, coming home. It's great. So first, I just want to say personal thanks to all of you for coming, because part of doing this research project, it was actually very emotionally stirring, the things that we heard from people about mental health. And I had just been working at Jewish Family and Career Services, so I was having a lot of personal experiences with people in distress already. So my job is really to set the table for this conversation, and I'm going to start with the why. I learned in business school, you always start with the why. So the research. The CDC warned in March 2022 of an accelerating mental health crisis among adolescents. That's just last March. More than 4 in 10 teens report that they feel persistently sad or hopeless, and 1 in 5, that's 20%, say they've contemplated suicide. Voices for Georgia's Children corroborated that. They found 41% of children ages 3 through 17 in Georgia struggle to or are not able to access needed mental health treatment and counseling. Among U.S. adults aged 18 through 29, the rates of anxiety and depression increased to 65% and 61% respectively by November 2020. And last but certainly not least, Georgia ranks last in the country for access to mental health care. It's kind of a perfect storm. I want to share with you also direct quotes from the people that we spoke to in these interviews. Camp counselors are not equipped to deal with the mental health issues because they're struggling with their own mental health issues. Our teens are struggling with disordered eating, sexual acting out, and suicidal ideation, and staff are expected to know how to deal with it. Our program staff don't have the resources to both offer programming and help people with their mental health issues. Parents of teens don't want to talk to each other about things like their kids cutting, so each of them feels isolated in their own experience. And being vulnerable in the Jewish community can be scary because everyone knows everyone. So I just want you to know that we're here today because our community is in crisis. So after more than 50 interviews and focus groups with youth service providers, clinicians, mental health experts, primarily in the Jewish community, but including some in the broader community, here's what we found. The system of services and resources is difficult to navigate and access. There are not enough clinical service providers. In fact, Georgia ranks at the very bottom with regard to access to mental health care. Clinicians and youth service providers are burned out and they need support. Stigma is very real and it's preventing people from getting help. And we are not focused enough on prevention, even though teaching resilience can prevent mental health crisis. So how can we respond? And the research made it clear, there are solutions. I'm just going to talk about them at a high level to give you a sense. We have to build clinical capacity. Prevention has to be considered just as important as treatment. Breaking down barriers by combating stigma is essential. And helping people navigate this labyrinthian system of mental health services is critical. So the when, I think I've done the how, the why, and the what. The when is now. So if you leave with just 3 or 4 things, these are the things I want you to leave with. Children, youth, their extended families, and service providers are suffering. 2, there are solutions and we know what they are. 3, people can heal and they can learn resilience to maintain their wellness. And 4, it will take all of us and then some to solve this problem because we need a multi-year, multifaceted approach to positively impact the mental health and well-being of our community. I really appreciate that you're all here today for taking part in this conversation, and look forward to the fact that, you know, it takes a village, and here we are. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for asking me to help frame today's conversation. Is this on? It is. Jewish people gathering to talk about mental health in our community, we go straight to the Torah, and we're better than this week's Torah portion. We read the story of the spies. The Jewish people are in the desert. They are poised to enter into the land of Israel. They want to send spies. You can read about it, Chabad.org or one of the other websites. The short story is they go into the land, they come back, and they say, we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in their eyes. There were giants there. This is a big, powerful country. We'll never be able to conquer it. We're afraid. And Joshua replies, and he says, we have God behind us. We can do this. He didn't say, don't be afraid, there's nothing to be afraid of. He didn't say, you imagine the giants, there's no giants there. He didn't contradict that at all. He said, in a sense, he said, yes, everything you experienced is your experience, but we have the power to overcome that. I think that this is a really important framing for our conversation today and for the conversation around mental health and addiction, which is the space of mental health that I'm particularly passionate about. Loneliness is something that is at the core of mental health and addiction. It's caused by trauma, it's caused by genetics, it's influenced by upbringing. There's all kinds of reasons why people experience that loneliness, but you can't talk someone out of their loneliness. It's just what their experience is. And when there's actual mental health issues, diagnoses and pathologies and so on, it only exacerbates the situation. But what's really interesting is that the solution, the first step in the solution to this problem is happening right this very second. And that is that you have people that are gathered talking about this issue. We're not hiding behind a wall whispering about somebody else's kid that has a problem. We're having the conversation out in the open. And that is exactly both the cause for whether it's a suicide ideation, or just the trauma of being alone, is thinking that there's no one else in the world that is experiencing what you're experiencing, or that if you mention it to someone, you're going to be judged for it. Is this a Jewish problem? I don't think so. It's in every self-identified or otherwise identified community that therefore has some kind of story that we tell about ourselves and certain structures that we create around how we self-identify, that therefore if we talk about if somebody else has that issue or that problem or whatever, that immediately isolates that person, further exacerbating their loneliness. But we have our own unique ethnicity as a Jewish people, and therefore because of that, we create our own problems. We create our own walls and structures and our own loneliness that is a result of that. So the conversation, the conversation around your Shabbat table, the conversation around community events that bring the conversation out into the open, all of that, just at a very beginning level. Obviously, there's so many layers, but just beginning the conversation publicly changes that stigma, reduces that stigma, and literally saves lives. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the stigma that kills, and it's the loneliness that kills, and it's the conversation about it that breaks down the loneliness, that breaks down the stigma, and immediately begins to bring healing. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated Shavuot, and it came right after Shabbat, and it was the day before the second day. So my wife and I sat down. It was about 5:20. We ate our ice creams, and then I said, by the way, you know, there's an AA meeting going on right now downstairs in Jeff's place, because every Sunday evening at our facility, we have an AA meeting. It's not an exclusively Jewish meeting. There's a small handful of Jews, but it's become one of the actual most popular meetings in Atlanta. So we went down there and we walked into this room, and Dina and I sat there for a half hour. They welcomed us in, completely blown away by something that was so profound. And that is, here were people that were talking about the stuff that lives inside of them, their fears, their triggers, and they're talking about it with a lightness, with a friendliness. If you've ever been to an AA meeting, which wasn't my first meeting, but it's the most beautiful thing. It's people that are willing to expose themselves because they don't feel judged by the other people in the room. They all have their therapists. They all have their sponsors. Everybody's got their own mechanism for healing. But at its core, it's the capacity to sit in a room of people and talk about the stuff that lives inside of us that we otherwise are not willing to discuss. So the work that we're doing here is very important. Each of the organizations, the funders, this work is life-saving, and it begins with the conversation. And there is hope, there is joy in life, and we're doing it right here. Thank you.
I was worried I was going to be sitting up here alone for a while. So I will tell you that when I was trying to think of what I wanted to say when I had my couple of minutes, it was very well covered by Rabbi Schusterman and Faye. Just really those basic ideas that just starting these conversations are those steps that we need to do to begin to deal with the stigma and the issues surrounding this. And one of the things at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta that we have started recently is a program focused on building resilience in kids. We have a program that we do in the schools and the pediatrician's office, and then also helping to educate families and other organizations on basically identifying feelings, what they are, and naming them so that kids have feelings besides happy and mad. and that fine is not a feeling and good is not a feeling either, that really being able to use feeling words and express ourselves and all feelings are okay. It's just a huge part of us learning to deal with our own mental health and getting some of these skills that we need so that when I get upset, I have something I can do to work through that and not having to use some of the things that we know are being used all over the place, like distraction and getting on electronics and other things that people are using to divert, really dealing with their own feelings. So at Children's, we certainly agree with the most important part of prevention being a huge piece of this and reducing stigma and getting these conversations started so that we can be there as a community, as a country, as whatever we need to be, household, so that we can be there for all of us. And to, again, take that time to sit with our own feelings so that we can role model this for our children. Remember, they aren't always listening to us, but they're always watching us. So again, any of the skills that we learn that we can pass on to them is very important to helping us get out of this crisis. But I'm very excited to start the panel off today. I believe everyone is going to get about 9 minutes to speak. I will try to keep everybody on task and on time. So I apologize if I'm interrupting a little bit. But again, as Ghila said, this is just the beginning of conversations. There's no way we can touch everything that we need to touch in these 9 minutes or even in these table conversations. But let's start off with Gabby Spatt, who's the Executive Director of the Blue Dove Foundation. And just a question to start off with, but feel free to add to it as you want. But what do you see as the most significant misconception about mental health, and what resources do you provide?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces and lots of new faces. And thank you to the foundation for bringing us all together. I know a lot of us talk all the time on this topic, so it's great to be together. And Rabbi Schusterman, you, I think, opened us up beautifully. And it's actually the same way that Blue Dove Foundation opens all of our programs, which were rooted and started in the idea of breaking stigma, in the idea of hearing stories, of hearing firsthand accounts of Jewish individuals who battle addiction and other mental illnesses. And so that is at the core of what the Blue Dove Foundation does: mental health education, awareness, and outreach through a Jewish lens. We were founded in Atlanta. Atlanta is our home. It is where our heart is. And we actually have become an international organization working with Jewish organizations all over, from various JFNCSs. And I always get to say what, when I'm from Atlanta and people say, oh, well, do you know JFNCS? And I was like, yeah. And everyone says they do so much good stuff. So it's amazing and so proud. I said, well, they're a partner of ours from the beginning. But what Blue Dove does, and the resources that we do provide, focus on the awareness, the education, and the outreach. And so we talked a lot about programming before, Ghila mentioned, and how do we make it so easy for these Jewish agencies, synagogues, schools, camps to bring this topic to their members, to their network, to their community, without creating more stress if they don't have somebody who specializes in that. And that's where Blue Dove has been able to fill that niche. And we do it from a Jewish education perspective, a community, not from a clinical perspective, which is what's really been unique. And we look at our Jewish faith, our Jewish culture, our Jewish spirituality, religion, whatever word identifies, with somebody, and work at that intersection of mental health, mental wellness, mental illness, and Judaism. And how do we look at Jewish holidays for inspiration, for support? Tu B'Av, which is coming up, right? The Jewish holiday of love. We look at it as a way of self-care and reminding people how important that is also in healing. And we've been able to create this niche, and these resources are used not only locally to create programs in our communities, and our team has spoken at those and goes in and facilitates, or different leaders take the resources and create their own programs and use them as inspiration to bring and share with their community. But we're also able now to dive deeper into bipolar disorder, to anxiety, and create additional tools and resources that can be used and read and connected with, again, to that Jewish lens is what makes us unique. We get phone calls very often from actually non-Jewish individuals who have said, I've seen you speak, I've done a Blue Dove program at an interfaith conversation. Is there something like this in the Catholic community that you know about? And a lot of times, saying no, we're not familiar with that. There are, AA meetings that are rooted in Christianity that are available. And so we do suggest those and other places, but it's been amazing to see how unique our space has been filled. And I think our success in the 3 years that we've been around have been from the beginning through partnerships with everyone sitting at the panel here and beyond. And because of the support from Atlanta and the work that we do continue to do in Atlanta, we have gotten beyond the local recognition, but the national recognition. And our work has been highlighted this year by Slingshot in the 10 to watch list, which was amazing. Followed actually by Upstart and being accepted into their National Entrepreneur Accelerator, which comes with an investment both financially, but also with an entrepreneur coach, right? And to kind of keep us moving forward in the work that we're doing. And so when I think about, misconceptions that are in this community, is that one person can't make a difference. And I actually think one person can truthfully, wholeheartedly make a difference. And if we can give our community the support and the knowledge and the education that they have to feel prepared to be almost like a first responder, right? Somebody that's confident to say, something's wrong. What's going on with you, right? I noticed you're different. You're not showing up. You look different. Something is off. And just opening up to have that conversation and to reach out, I think is so powerful. And we've heard those stories time and time again. I think also the misconception of not sharing enough. I'm the first person to talk the talk and walk the walk. I lost my younger sister to an opioid overdose. She, struggled with bipolar disorder, internalized it all and made an unfortunate decision, one night. And so for me, this work is personal in addition to, supporting my community. And it became healing for myself. And I didn't realize how important Jewish spirituality, Jewish connection could be to that. And I think there are so many people in the Jewish community, both locally and everywhere, that could use that connection and that encouragement still. So Blue Dove offers the educational resources, the content that's out there, the social media connections, all of that. And it's through workshops that we've developed that connect Jewish values and ritual. We have Jewish Midot that we've identified, Jewish values. We go through them in a workshop. We've been able to take the Misha Bera, right, this traditional prayer, this ritual prayer that's available that we have always heard if somebody's in the hospital, right? But we've seen that change over the last several years, right? Full healing of mind, body, and soul. And that's actually a really popular workshop where people get to write a Misha Bera for mental health on a topic they choose. And it's a connection to our culture and to our history and our ritual that people have really enjoyed. We also have a Jewish mental wellness toolkit that has been created and distributed. We have various publications that are there, but one of our largest programs is actually called Quieting the Silence. And it's our first program that brought over 200 people together in the Atlanta Jewish community, not for a fundraising dinner, but for a real powerful conversation. And many of the people actually were in the room there and participating. And that was the first time where we saw real community members stand up and share their stories on suicide, on stress and anxiety, on managing and helping their children who are dealing with suicidal thoughts. And that was powerful. And we heard, we want more from the community. And we did it again. And then we did it again. And each time it's had a different topic, a different, theme. And so we've actually been doing those now for 3 years across the country and locally, and connecting and going back to that stigma piece and putting the stories out there, because that person says, I've gone through that, right? I can connect with that. You're not alone. And that's really, just as Rabbi Schusterman said earlier, where we're starting to see the breakdown of the stigma, where people feel more welcome, right? More a part of the community. And I think more than anything, if we can heal our community and provide them with the knowledge and the education and the tools, we're going to see a healthier, more involved, engaged Jewish community, which is the most important thing too.
Yes.
in our community.
Sorry. Thank you, Gabby. And I will say, one of the things that I really enjoyed was just getting on everybody's websites and realizing the amazing resources. And so I would tell you to do it, make sure you've got some time, because I don't even know how long really diving into it. And I really appreciate everything that you were sharing there. Again, these are the issues we need to talk about. And let's move on to Eileen Price, right next to me, who's the founder and CEO of In the City Camps. So now we're switching to teens a little bit. What are we grappling with, and what's new, and what have you found to be helpful with this group?
Do I have to use the microphone? Yes.
Elections. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? All right. So nice to see everybody. Thank you for including us in this important dialogue. So after last summer, after camp last summer, we realized, myself and Mrs. Donna Moon, she's our on-site social worker. She's with us for 5 years. We identified that we have to do something different in order to address the teen population. We all knew in the pandemic that the teens were being impacted, but nobody was quite sure what it looks like. We now know what it looks like, and it's not pretty. And so what we decided was we needed to get ahead of the situation. So what we have done, and then this will inform kind of how our work is happening this summer. Not only did we call all of our partners up here who have worked with us, but we called Betsy Stone to help us write a curriculum. Thank you to the Federation for helping pay for that. We wanted a curriculum around strength-based, for the staff, because we felt like we had to start with the staff. The staff had to understand that we value them as their whole self, and that they have feelings and emotions that they're unaware of. How did I know that? I saw more children have nervous breakdowns last summer than I ever have in my entire life, and I'm not a social worker. Danya and I scooped a lot of children who had just come out of isolation off the floor and either had to call their parents. These are full functioning teenagers who drive, and if you saw them in the world, you would think, oh, that kid's doing amazing. They got into Brown. They're killing it. Meanwhile, that kid was in the ball because a little kid upset them because they said that they don't like their hair or something. So they were getting triggered. So one of the things we realized is we had to start with them. So we spent 2 days just on a strength-based curriculum that we had written. It's 4 modules. We wrote it for camping. We're going to open source it and actually teach everybody this December. There's going to be a conference here in Atlanta with Foundation for Jewish Camps, and Betsy Stone will be there. And at that time, we're open sourcing it so the whole community, the whole camp community can have this as a tool. We're also measuring it every week at camp to understand how did the staff receive the information, how are they executing and implementing it, and how do they come from a place of strength at all times. Our brains, and this is what we keep trying to tell the staff, our brains are trying to play a trick on us and always think of what's bad, not what's right. But I have 140 staff this summer. Nobody had ever told them that. So I had to keep saying to them, no, you need to focus on your strengths. So you name the exercise, we did it. They all know their strengths. It's on their badges every day. When we see them, we're like, what strength did you just use to help execute that? Yeah. So in the morning, we concierge the kids in and out of the car, right? So we're in the business of creating community. So in the city camps, everything that's happening is around relationships. So I said to somebody, I see that you're not carrying that kid's bag, and that kid's 5 and their bag's 500 pounds. Could you help? And I said, what about your strengths would help you do that? And they're like, well, I like helping people. That's one of my strengths. And I said, great. This is when you're going to actualize that. Every time you see a child struggling with their bag, that's your cue to help pick up the bag. So the staff pre-pandemic, because Danya and I were doing this work pre-pandemic together, we didn't have any of these issues. So I want to also just say that the pandemic was a massive issue that really for us in the teen space have seen that. The other thing we are doing is we are partnering with Chris 180, with our Chris 180 people in the room. So we partnered with Chris 180 this summer to bring in social workers, because Donnie is just one human and we have 2 sites. And we have social workers, one for the staff and one for the campers, because it's not fair to the campers to get all the attention. The staff are just as critical. And if the staff are not whole, then the campers cannot be whole. So part of what the staff is doing with the campers is talking about strength-based and using that as a dialogue when the campers get dysregulated before they're like, walking, Tanya, I need you on floor 3 right now, and she's in the basement and she's like running to the top. We have different tools we can teach the staff, the teams, which is helping them re-regulate. So we're seeing a lot of that helping, and the Chris 180 team is really there to help on the extreme cases, which there still are, more in the campers. But we've seen the staff through these tools really become more regulated, and the staff now has language to use, and Weber School is actually going to be using the same strength-based curriculum with their kids, and we're going to measure what happens when you have a rising 10th grader who works at inner city camps and who attends the Weber School and does all these other Jewish communal things. How do we measure the person they become as a result of talking frontally with them, not from a mental health perspective, but from a place of like, you have emotions, you're human, that's normal. I'm human and I have emotions. So also when they come to us very upset, we're able to say to them, like, we have tools for this. Like, time out, we're on the same team. So that has really helped us in general, and it has been an amazing summer so far. And the other thing is that we're also seeing in the teen space as well that the children who are on the spectrum are now adults who are on the spectrum, and they need employment. And so one of the things we're doing this summer is talking with JF&CS. We have 6 or 7 staff members who are on the spectrum that we learned about at staff training, but we're able to pivot and like incorporate them. They need different type of staff training and different type of tools to be successful. For example, when I say just put your stuff down, some people can just put their stuff down. Other people need to know exactly where to put their stuff down, and if we don't tell them, it will dysregulate them. And in the city camps, we're all about self-actualizing, but we can reprogram that now that we understand. So we are a community that tries to build community with everybody, neurodivergent, and everybody's welcome in our space, and we are blessed to live in a community that can help us. We are not experts, we are just the facilitators of bringing in the people who can really help us be our best selves.
I think that that's amazing. And I love the whole strength base because it gives people such a positive place to start from. And that's something that we're not used to, or like you said, we're always used to thinking, what did I do wrong in that situation or things like that. So and teens need that especially because there's so much input from so many different places about what they're not good at. So that's wonderful. Okay, we're going to ask Rabbi Schusterman, who is the founder of Jeff's Place. Tell us a little bit about why Jeff's Place and what is the role of the community in recovery and healing.
Okay, thank you. Let me try something first. By a show of hands, how many people here have attended a funeral of someone, let's say under the age of 35, that died from an overdose? Okay, so about a third of the room. The reality is that addiction affects all of us, 1 degree, 2 degrees of separation. It destroys the life of the addict, the life of their loved ones, and it's just tragic. So how did I get involved in this? So at its core, it was an event, a tragic event. There was a young man that was coming to Chabad, showed up, I don't know, my dates, probably somewhere in 2015 or 2016. He showed up on a Friday night, asked if he could join us for services. He looked lost. I said, sure, come. When services were over, he asked if he can come back the next week. I said, of course. He started coming every Friday night. Then he started coming every Saturday day. Then he started hanging out after services on Saturday day and hanging out with Rabbi Solish, who's the other Chabad rabbi, and studying Torah together. And then he started becoming Shomer Shabbat. He started staying over Friday nights. And just a really sweet guy, curious, looking for connection, and didn't make much more of it than that. One Shabbat morning, he didn't show up to services as he had for quite some time. And by 11 o'clock, somebody had come in and said that he was found having had a relapse and passed away. Tragic in its own right, but what was so shocking, and for me, not the real tragedy, but part of the tragedy, is that none of us knew that he was in recovery. And it became even more shocking when, at his funeral, there were about 50 people from the Chabad community and 150 people from his recovery community, including 5 people that he was a sponsor for. So the technical part is that we were in the process of buying our amazing building on the Beltline, and I reached out to his mother and said, let's dedicate a space in his memory. And she said, I'm not just going to give you money. I need you to do something for the recovery community, and I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to give my gift over 4 years, and if you deliver on it, I'll keep on giving the gift. So we invested ourselves in Jewish recovery. I've always had a fondness for people in recovery. Before I ever learned the thing about recovery, I just always found them to be people who are lighter, more authentic, even humorous. But then as I began to invest ourselves in Jewish recovery, I came to discover that the world of recovery, the journey of recovery, especially the 12 steps, is something that every human being can benefit from. You don't have to be addicted to a substance to experience or a process or a behavior, to experience the discomfort that an addict experiences. At its core, what we know is that addiction is a spiritual disease, it's a spiritual malady, and it's basically the impossibility of reconciling our physical and our spiritual. There's a discomfort. All of us experiences discomfort at times. We call it loneliness, we call it anxiety, we call it depression, we call it just being out of sorts. The thing is that for most of us, we get over it, and then, or we go to the gym, you let off some steam, or you maybe scream at somebody, maybe not a good way out, but sometimes that does the trick. But for the addict, that doesn't work. They don't find that peace, and therefore they turn to the substance or the behavior that gives them temporary relief. There's endless books about this. I don't need to give you the science or the philosophy behind it. But at its core is when there's an embrace, as first step, surrender, second step, embracing higher power, that journey begins and it begins to heal. So that's how Jeff's Place was born. Jeff Krause, he's the young man that passed away. And so we began by inviting in to our center an AA meeting and an SA meeting, both that take place on Sunday evening. SA is Sex Addicts Anonymous. And then I began to study the 12 steps. I have a weekly study session that I've been doing now for 3 or 4 years with 2 people in recovery. We went through the big book. We're now doing the 12 and 12. We're almost finished the 12 and 12. And in that process, I began to identify that these principles are principles that are tools for life for people in recovery, their loved ones, and any growing human being. So I began to teach classes on the 12 steps, because one of the misconceptions about the 12 steps is that it's a Christian organization. It's a Christian, and even though, to be fair, it was founded by Christians, the principles, Jesus' name is not mentioned once in the book. In fact, at the beginning, it doesn't even talk about God. It talks about a higher power, and eventually, slowly, it moves into God. But we're not afraid of God. I would say we invented him, but that's not, wouldn't be, so, and what I found is that people were eating this up. Both, I've done groups for people in recovery. I've done groups for loved ones of people in recovery. And then what I also realized is that many Jewish professionals are of that notion, and I say Jewish professionals, I mean also rabbis are of that notion that the 12 steps is a Christian thing. And in a sense, just like when we have a teenager that's falling apart, if we don't have tools to help them, we can't help them. And if we have judgment for them and not a clear understanding of what they're going through, we can't be there for them in any way, let alone calling on the resources. Rabbis and Jewish professionals who don't understand what addiction is, don't understand the core of it, and don't understand the tools to bring healing, are just really at a loss. And they join the ranks of the rest of the people who see people who are struggling with an addiction as some kind of low life, somebody who just can't get their life together. And the science around addiction today is completely changed. It's so radically changed, even since AA was started. It's a totally different world. So the first objective is just to open the conversation. Chabad in town has an AA meeting. How many Jewish organizations can say that? And by the way, again, it's not just that Jews are going there, non-Jews are going there. Like, that's an amazing thing that a Jewish center, why does a Jew need to struggle whether they should go into a church basement when they need help? Let them know that their own synagogue, the JCC, the Jewish organization down the block, has an opportunity for them to go and attend an AA meeting. And that there's a rabbi that's comfortable talking from the pulpit about recovery. It's just part of the conversation. It's not, I'm not giving a lecture or a sermon to people in recovery. I'm just using recovery language that anybody in recovery resonates with, and anybody who's 1 or 2 degrees of separation begins to internalize that. A number of awareness events. Again, why is Chabad in town? Why is Jeff's Place hosting a Quieting the Silence event? What's that about? So in the process, I was recruited by Christian Thrasher, who is the director of the Clinton Foundation's Interfaith Task Force on the Opioid Crisis, and participated in the second cohort of interfaith leaders based here in Atlanta. They're up to their 5th or 6th. And in that process, I invested myself even more and have become a leader in the interfaith community around addiction and recovery. They brought me up to Nashville about a month ago to speak at a conference, a panel of interfaith leaders to 250 medical professionals to talk about spirituality in recovery. I was invited to meet with President Clinton and Hillary. Am I running out of time?
No, you qualified for a second.
Oh, sure. We don't have all day though. Chabad is in a nutshell, we are a Jewish organization. It's a Hasidic group, 300 years old, but since the 40s has been engaged in Jewish outreach. Today, Chabad centers are everywhere in the world, literally everywhere in the world, as long as Jews are allowed in the country and they won't get killed in the process, even sometimes in those countries too. And we just really open our doors, try to respond to the needs of the community, providing resources and support, engagement, spirituality, Torah study, programs, and so on and so forth. So our geographic service area, so to speak, is the in-town community. We're based on the Beltline, and that's where we operate from. In middle of August, the Clinton Global Initiative, which is a tremendous organization that brings together billions of dollars in investments and major companies and so on, and they're restarting at the UN meeting this year. They're going to be doing a 15-state bus tour, and they're stopping in Atlanta at Jeff's Place. And hopefully we'll be having the mayor come as well. And it's to bring awareness around the work that the Clinton Foundation does. Obviously, this is not a political statement in one way or the other, because addiction rises above or below politics and really everything else, right? It's just something that is pervasive. So to summarize, or to get to the punchline here, there's tremendous need. And my passion is to increase the number of AA meetings being housed in Jewish centers. I'd love to develop a curriculum around the 12 steps that can be taught to Jewish professionals, rabbis, leaders, to understand what addiction really is and what the 12 steps are. Because again, like I said, for me, the reason why it resonates so much is not just because it helps people in recovery, but it's amazing tools for living. They really speak the language that I grew up on. Chabad philosophy, these are the tools, and it just puts it into an amazing system. I'd love to increase the number of awareness events that we're doing. We facilitated, it was my inspiration, but now it's got a life of its own. Jewish Federation participated last year, partnered. The annual Jewish retreat, which last year was in Stone Mountain, this year is in South Florida. They hosted the first Spirituality and Wellness Conference. The second one is taking place now in South Florida, and will continue to go over subsequent years. So there's so many different, touch points when it comes to mental health and the struggle around this. This is a big one. It consumes lives of the addict and their loved ones. Healing is available, not always. That's the reality of it. It's not always. We can't help everybody, but we can always make their journey a little easier. So that's my spiel.
Thank you, Rabbi Schusterman. I think that, the 12 steps, like you said, are just, it's so much more than just these 12 steps that people think about, but also the fact that the science is changing so much around addiction and other issues, that I think we're going to see so many things grow and develop in the ways that our mental health and our physical health come together. I think that that's what's the 12 steps really offers, a way to do some of that. And now we're going to ask Terri Bonoff, who's the CEO of JF&CS. So when it comes to the scope of your work in mental health, it's changed tremendously over the last few years. Can you tell us a little bit more about the expansion into child and family areas?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for having me, and what a rich conversation so far. So Rabbi Schusterman, I lost a stepbrother many years ago who was so smart and so religious, and he would not go to an AA meeting because it didn't call to him. And so I wished he had known you. JF&CS has made a profound commitment to address the mental health of children, teens, and families. We have expanded the scope of our practice with the launch of our Horowitz-Sussman Child and Family Center. Thanks to the incredible generosity of this philanthropic community, we've been able to do that. Obviously, the Horowitz-Sussman family being named has been our key donor, but not just them, so many others. And so I couldn't speak without expressing my gratitude for that. We begin with a vision that children, teens, families are well, that they are joyful, they are healthy, they are vibrant, and there are obstacles to their experience of that. And so we at JF&CS are determined to approach them from a new perspective, to say they are not independent. Children are not by themselves, right? They're part of a system. Teens are not isolated. They live in a family. They go to school. They have social interactions. How can we take our commitment to the whole child and approach it from a commitment to their wellness, to their ability to experience life in a more joyful way? And so in keeping with that commitment, we are using several evidence-based modalities to address that. So for example, I have to point out Dr. Schub is sitting back there. Wave your hand, Dr. Schub. So Dr. Schub came out of retirement to join the JF&CS practice. He is a child neurologist, which we are so grateful to have him as part of our services. We had a woman, Lori Wilson, for years doing psychoeducational testing, huge waiting list. We've now added 2 others because it's important that we bring children in, that we assess what's really going on with them, and then we address what's going on with them. We've added a parent coach because when a child is being addressed, you have to address the parent as well. If the child experiences new tools that can help them be resilient, but they go back into a family system where the parent is still addressing them in the old way, they aren't going to make progress. And so Carrie Newman, we have brought on as a parent coach, and she's phenomenal. We know how important it is to intervene early. So we have 3 of our clinicians are now undergoing practice therapy called early education psychotherapy. We've started a group called Stepping Stones, which literally is for kids birth to 2 to come and work with our clinicians in a play group while their parents are working with a different clinician around parenting. And then we bring them all together to let the parents observe the kids playing, seeing how that clinician approaches the play and then is able to get coached in that manner. So these are unique practices. Maybe everything we're trying won't end up working, but we are determined to address this tsunami and crisis with everything that we can find to bring health and well-being to the community. And I really appreciate, Eileen, your approach to addressing your staff. And we have added many clinicians, but we have a shortage. I wish, we could have had enough clinicians to partner with Chris 180 and be on site in the city camp. we have added clinicians. I want to make sure I address everything that we have added. So I mentioned the psychoed testing. We have art therapy. We have support groups. We are partnering with Sojourn in our Owen Halpern LGBTQ and affirming support groups. I have clinicians who specialize in seeing children and teens who are addressing sexual orientation and identity issues. Jamie Stepansky is the clinician who comes to mind. She tells me that she has children as young as 7 who are questioning their sexual identity. And when they see what's happening on the news, or they hear about conversations that are taking place in school about whether or not they can participate in a sport or not based on how they identify, they're crushed. They're devastated. And so our clinicians are able to bring some context and conversation to the confusion that they're experiencing, as well as supporting their parents. We're in the process right now of talking to another child psychiatrist, looking at, are there additional modalities where there's a need in the community? I had a parent contact Jeff and CS recently about her daughter and her daughter's needs as it related to eating disorder. And we didn't have that specialty. I reached out to the Berman Center on a weekend and said, can you help? I was given names of a nutritionist, of a therapist. So I think that all of us in this room and on this panel, we know that we can't do it alone. It really is the strength of our partnerships and our willingness to be curious about what's missing. And then as a community to have that commitment to address what's missing with effective action. And Faye Dresner, I have to call out because Faye, before she left JFNCS, she was our Chief Impact Officer, and it was really under Faye's tenure that this Horowitz-Sussman Child and Family Center started. And so coming full circle to now have Faye in this role as the consultant to the foundation's work in the mental health arena is just about perfect. So thank you, Faye. Well, and true. Yeah, and thank you for your leadership.
I think that's it.
Okay,
Thank you, Terri. Yes, and I just love continually bringing it back to, it takes all of us. It takes all of us. But for our last speaker, we have Rebecca Stapel-Wax, who's the Executive Director of Sojourn, who you have already introduced for us, Terri. So thank you. So what's unique about the crisis in the LGBTQ plus community, and what is the core of your work?
It's no wonder you stumble over letters. It changes often, and we go with GSD, which is gender and sexual diversity. A little smaller,
So much easier.
and we try to be as shared experience as possible. I'm learning every day. I've been doing this work for almost 18 years, and times have changed, right? And it feels sometimes like we're going backwards. What is so distinctly different for gender and sexually diverse kids and adults, and eventually there will be adults, is they're being completely attacked. There's a discrepancy between the number, but there's probably 200 to 300 legislative bills that are anti-trans and LGBT since 2022 began, and we're not halfway through. We have 28 states that have active legislation that 8 have passed. Only 14 states don't have any anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. And all of these laws, bills, legislation, they're attempting to erase people and youth from the anti-trans participation in sports, to gender affirming healthcare, to being able to talk about their families in school, to not having access to a restroom in which they feel safe. That is, as you mentioned about when 7-year-olds hear that they might not be able to participate in sports, there was a solidarity rally for trans youth just over 10 days ago, I think it was, and had to be canceled because there was credible threats of violence. It's chilling, and we have an incredible community willing to talk about this. In 2004, when I began, I couldn't walk into somebody's door. It was not so easy. This is about human beings, and when we're talking about what we can do, it is about visibility. I brought the recent Atlanta Jewish Times. It mentions 2 young moms who died recently, and I don't know their families, and they're not necessarily associated with Sojourn, but they succumbed to the disease of mental illness. Is such a devastating thing for families, and yet it's in print. I've had clergy ask me about how to address these anti-trans and LGBT bills because they don't feel well informed. And it's a conversation. Again, it's about humanity, and it's about realizing that everybody deserves the dignity of being able to live a full life and reach their potential. And so Sojourn does advocacy work. We're a 501c3. So we do talk about legislation because it does fully impact the life and wellness of our youth and adults. We have a health and wellness program called Sources of Strength, which is, Gabby mentioned about one person having the ability to make a difference. And this approach is also that one slice of the pie can't be everything to everybody, that we do need each other. And so it does take access to mental health. There's a study by the Trevor Project that studied 35,000 youth. It is a tremendous study, and I highly recommend looking it up. There were a substantial amount of youth who were not able to access mental health care. What's distinctly different is that I might go home and the rest of my family is Jewish, or I might go home and the rest of my family is the same race as me and same pigment as me. But I may go home and nobody can understand my experience because of my gender identity. And during the pandemic, about 30% of youth thought that they were not safe at home. And imagine, a pandemic on top of that. And these are not the oppression Olympics, for sure. It's just really radically different experience for some youth. And so this Sources of Strength training, where we have been in Fannin County in Blue Ridge, talking with their high schoolers, and being able to talk to them about identifying when somebody's in crisis, identifying a trusted adult, and also finding their strengths. I love that they're wearing it on their sleeve or their heart or every day in the city camps. It's a huge thing to have a reminder that you have the innate ability to walk through this life. And so in addition to all the advocacy issues that are going on and the education that needs to happen so that people do feel empowered, our Jewish tradition has that base that we can talk from, that we talk about welcome the stranger. It's in there 36 times in our Torah. We talk about different sexes in our times. People have been across the spectrum since forever. We just in the last 10 years have been using language like non-binary or gender non-conforming or genderqueer or many, many others that we don't need to be afraid of just because we don't know the whole glossary. Like I said, I learn on a daily basis, and I look forward to learning with each other more.
I think that's the key point. Just because you don't know the words doesn't mean you have to be afraid of them. Right? It's a matter of learning. But
Thank you, everybody. And we'll continue the conversation in just a second. So we had promised to let you go at 1:30. So we're changing the format a little bit. We will pivot to a Q&A so that everybody will have an opportunity to ask questions and for you to answer. But I also would like to give an opportunity to the people who are in the room to introduce themselves. And so if you would like, there's a microphone in the middle of every table, and the tables are numbered, starting from the table in the back. There's number 1. So if we can go around and for everybody to say first and last name and the organizations that you're with, if you'd like, and then we'll start. Okay, so never mind, scrap that. Only. So if there's an organization out there who would like to introduce themselves, please do so. We're going to go around and then we'll do a Q&A. I also want to remind everybody that at the table outside, we have some sign-up sheets. We are going to have site visits for all of the organizations up here. We don't have specific dates yet, but if you like to come to a site visit, please sign up and we will follow up and coordinate. So we will start. Oh. Button at the bottom of the mic. So we'll start with table number 1, if there's anyone.
oh, no worries.
Thank you. Hello, can y'all hear me? All right, great. Sorry, I'm terrible with technology. Hello, my name is Brian Moore. I'm a trauma psychologist by training. I'm the director of the Ames Research Center at Kennesaw State University. And so we're focused on developing prehabilitative approaches to stress and trauma, or specifically we work with military, veterans, first responders, their families, and then more broadly, their communities. Many of you have very aptly stated that you can't treat the individual, you have to treat sort of the system. And that's what we're interested in doing. Thank you very much for inviting us to be here today. Thank you.
Testing. Okay. Hi, I'm Kathleen Kelly. I'm with a nonprofit called Furnished with Love, and Ghila is one of our founding board members. I will share. So we have a special Ghila connection here. Oh, I lost it. Yeah. Okay. So we professionally design and furnish homes for families transitioning from homelessness And the concept is more than simply putting furniture in the homes to help with the family's mental health. We make it feel like a really nice home that represents who they are, has the colors that are important to them. They have the opportunity to be treated like any interior design client. And it's all a gift from us. And we then wish them well, knowing that they can wake up every morning and feel proud of where they are and feel like it reflects for the children a lifestyle that they should expect and work towards for their own future.
Okay. My name is Howard Chu, and you mentioned my name before. I'm a child neurologist who's been an active child neurologist in the Atlanta community for over 30 years, and I retired about a year ago. I'm dealing with my own issues of stress and anxiety around COVID and providing medical care, among other issues. But I'm pleased to have come out of retirement and to be the medical support on the Zussman Horowitz Child and Family Center at JFCS, where it really addresses for me the interface between neurology, my interest in developmental and behavioral neurology, and the comorbid conditions of anxiety, depression, bereavement. I do a great deal of ADHD and a lot of tics, Tourette syndrome, and movement disorders, and I'm looking forward to what's an enormously rich collaborative environment at JFCS, and it's been a pleasure so far.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lane Pease Hendricks. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at Kate's Club. If you're not familiar, we are a bereavement organization for children ages 5 to 18 and their families. And we just launched this year a young adult program for those 18 to 30. And we also do outreach. We do a lot of schoolwork and community-based work, as well as trainings and education for both families and professionals. We know since the pandemic, the rate in Georgia of just bereavement by a parent or sibling is 1 in 12 now, by the time they're 18.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lebovitz with Chris 180. Thank you so much for that awesome shout out. So we are trauma-informed mental health for at-risk youth and families, but we also provide a lot of community outreach and preventative intervention points so that hopefully we never get to the situations that we're all talking about today is kind of the idea behind that. We have therapists based in public schools. We are best known for foster care. We also do adoption services. And we have some supportive residential programs for emerging adults experiencing homelessness. We work very collaboratively with a lot of organizations, and we also do training internally and externally. So if you work for an organization or you're part of an organization that wants training on what does it mean to be trauma-informed or resilient, much like the training we did for in the city camp, we design it based on the audience in front of us. And we also do DEIB training. We're also well known for the work we've done in the queer community and with queer youth and helping them find spaces where they are safe and can grow up safely. Yeah, that's us. That's Chris 180. Oh, sorry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Weissman of JFLA Jewish Atlanta. We exist to, I guess, provide financial security and access to interest-free loans for any. Really pleased to see everybody on the panel works with us, and we're here as a resource to really the entire community for any number of reasons, whether it's mental health or a home or a flooded basement or fertility. Yeah. Oh, and I have some postcards, just I'll put them out on the table.
I'm Beth Paradis, chair of the Atlanta Jewish Foundation. I just want to thank Joy Mendel and her most accomplished team for for all the work that they've done in this space. And it's been going on for quite some time. And it's really our hope that we'll be able to roll this out to our fund holders and our partners. And we really just thank you.
I'm Ed Harvis. I'm the head of the Weber School, and so I'm here with two colleagues, Shlana Van Dyke, who's the principal of the Weber School, and Drew Cohen, who is the director of music and director of our evolving Performing Arts Academy.
Hi, I'm Kelly Cohen, and I am, as of last week, now working at the GCC here in Atlanta as the new Senior Director of Experiential Jewish Education.
Hi, I'm Donna Malone, and like Eileen said, I'm the social worker on site at In the City Camp. During the year, the lower and middle school counselor at Mill Springs Academy, a school for children with learning disabilities, ADHD, and autism spectrum disorder. And I also am a therapist in private practice at I do play therapy primarily at a practice in Alpharetta. And so I collaborate with Eileen during the year, and then of course all summer on our social emotional accommodations for the camp. Thank you.
Wow, there's what an amazing group of people to have here. So thank you all. I'm now opening it up for questions. I don't know if you want to use your table microphone or I can hand.
Several years ago, the buzzword was grit. We wanted to develop grit in our kids. And now we're talking in a much softer and I think more appropriate way about resilience. And I just wanted to hold up that difference because I think it's really important.
I think that's a great point that grit's something you have, resilience is something you build.
We were working
right?
very actively to develop grit.
Right,
And
right.
That's a
It's absolutely right.
Stephanie, I'm just also wanting to say, like, it's about compassion too. I think if we've ever been on a Zoom call and we haven't unmuted yet after 2+ years, and we have to have that self-compassion as well as the patience and the love and the appreciation for each other.
I want to say, I think the pandemic shifted that, right? Like our world was about rigor, and you get grit by being harder and faster and more serious, right? Like just work harder. And then the pandemic came and we were all like, that's terrible. It's causing a mental health crisis. Let's shift our narrative, right? So like at camp, right, we say to the staff, you do seem hot. What can you do to help yourself before you melt in front of these children? Because you're the adult in this space. What tools are you going to show resiliency? And then you're going to pass that on. And like, they're, you know, like we raised them in one way and now we're kind of like, just kidding, that sucks. So like, I think the more we can have these conversations about like honesty, like, that wasn't great advice. I am so sorry about that. But this is really, but it's going to take a whole generation to really change it. I want to just also name that like, even though we're all working collectively and we're all working collectively, it's going to take another generation before they evolve into the people who weren't suffering from the pandemic that can emerge from that.
Right. And that whole idea of we weren't doing it well before, now we're going to do it better. Right. And think that should be something we're all able to say. Anybody else with a question?
Yes. Hi, everybody. It's very good to see you all. So I obviously have done work in this space with all the folks up there. And I think that what you were saying, Eileen, before the pandemic, we were really focused on awareness and raising awareness and trying to get to people to open up the conversation about mental health and wellness. And I feel like the pandemic shifted that. We don't necessarily need to do awareness work in the same way. We all know that this is the reality and we're all going through it, and there's depression and anxiety and kind of the the need for awareness has shifted. I'm just kind of wondering, what do you see as, now that that's cracked open, like what's the work right now that needs to happen? Is it additional work around awareness? Is it really leaning into this conversation that's been opened? Like, what is the work right now if we move beyond just awareness?
Okay, so I can just say from like a kid's perspective, Danya and I stand in one of the 2 parking lines in each facility, and every morning we get this. Like, yeah, you're gonna tell me your kid has anxiety or ADHD and you're struggling with the same thing. Sure, what's happening? And they tell me, so-and-so, we just got diagnosed, they had this. And so like, the first thing I would say is helping parents know that they're safe in our community, be honest about who they are, who their child is, and the schools, Jewish schools, non-Jewish schools, whatever, that's where I'd like to see the support start, because that is really the crux, right? Like the kid is at the home of the parent to help them, and the parents are so embarrassed about it that we can't then help the children. So I always say to the parents, go get your kid. This isn't, there's nothing wrong with them. You don't need to whisper, go get your kid. And then I always say to the kids, like, you are in a safe space to self-actualize what you want to happen. So if so-and-so wasn't nice to you, they weren't bullying you, what was really happening in the situation? And so I think helping the parents through JFNCS and all of our work know that the Jewish community is a safe place to welcome them and to help them. If there's nothing wrong with their children, they're not broken. We're all just trying to do the best we can. And so that's what I would love to see as like a next step.
I just wanted to say that we started this work way before the pandemic. When I first came to my role as CEO, I did this listening tour and was talking to clergy, talking to board members, talking to community members, and I kept hearing the kids are in trouble, the kids are depressed, the kids are anxious. And so we actually presented to our board and past presidents early on that we wanted to address it and we didn't know what it would look like. And so we got a planning grant and we had experts from Georgia State University do focus groups and talk to some of you and talk to other organizations, look what was happening around the country. And so this approach that JFNCS is now using, the systems approach, came from a very intentional and strategic review. So I think you can never stop doing awareness, and thank goodness for you doing awareness and for all those who are doing that. But we do think, and I think Faye and others said, we do know what the tools are. And it's like a continuum of acuity. You've got to get prevention first, do that mindfulness work, use the tools that can stop a child, a teen, a family from going into a space where it's much more serious. At each level of where they're at, there really are best practices and evidence-based approaches to address it. We just have to make sure that our doors are open and accessible.
I agree with both of you. And I think now that we've seen the awareness, it's the education. And how do we see that time and time again, and in different years and different ages and different demographics? And, you know, how do we bring it into what we create in our communities and our programs and our schools and our camps? And if you keep hearing it again, education and communication, I think, is the key. And I think the other piece about the awareness is how much the community and funders have changed their thinking, right? All of us in this room today wouldn't have probably happened many years ago before the pandemic. And so I always am so proud of the funders, both locally and also outside of the Atlanta Jewish community, who are thinking differently too.
And I also think it's about connection. You know, and we have Drawing from the Well on Fridays at noon every week. It's a safe space virtually to talk about what's gone on this week, how it ties into the Torah portion. We're having Pride Outside on Sunday. You know, a time for us to gather this is huge, to be in a room in person live with human beings from the neck up. You know, it's connection, as you were saying, Rabbi Schusterman. Like, alienation is toxic, and we need to connect with one another in all forms.
Thank you to Jump Spark, who's also in the room. And I know Kelly, that's how we first knew each other, and Nathan and Amy. So again, partnerships.
Absolutely. Yep, I think we have time for one more.
Someone in your circle or friends or loved ones wants it, but the other side of the coin is that it's very expensive. And what we see time and time again is people know they need it, they know they want it, but it's not free, and there's a stigma about asking for help to pay for it. And I think when we address all these different stigmas of mental health, we also have to recognize that all these Jewish people in the world think that they should be able to afford everything that their children and loved ones want. That's not everyone. And that's the other side of it.
That is true. And one of the things we actually did at Children's too is put together an information sheet for families about all the different types of people who offer services. I mean, I had to learn a whole new alphabet, right? What's an LPC and an LCSW, right? So there are lots of other resources, and just helping people access and find what those are. Because if you go always looking for a psychologist, it's going to be hard to find someone. So again, being open, but the cost is an issue. Healthcare costs are an issue in general. Did anyone else want to comment on that? Of course.
Do you or does anyone else have any updates on what happened in the last legislative session at the state level, where they were trying to advocate for parity in terms of reimbursements and how that might impact affordability or accessibility?
I don't have an update.
So it passed, the speaker's bill passed, and the speaker's bill was about access, and it was mandating the insurance companies to treat mental health in the same way they treat physical, but the details haven't been written yet. You know, once it passes, then the administration officials have to write the rules. And so, as they say, devil's in the details, we don't know. The other thing that was so disappointing, maybe you, has it been, do you have more insight? Yeah, I wasn't. The other piece is they did not appropriate money to expand capacity, and that was disappointing.
But practically have a diagnosis.
Right.
The waiting list to even get diagnosed are 2 years long.
Right, and they didn't add capacity.
So if you can't get a diagnosis, then you can't get treatment. It doesn't help if there's parity. Kids
Right.
can't get the kid the diagnosis.
And it sounds like you've got more info.
So we were just having this discussion last week. We were part of this symposium with the state. I think I'm actually the only psychologist who's involved with a bunch of insurance people and stakeholders. That was just terrible, right? The diagnosis has to come from a psychologist or psychiatrist. And I said, well, Georgia's 48 to 49, depending on who you're looking at for foundation behavioral health services. Where is someone in Cordial, Georgia, going to find a psychologist or psychiatrist that they can afford and or is able to provide trauma-informed care or diagnosis? And their response was, yeah, it's not really our problem. Like, this is how we're going to give them $10,000 to have this. And I said, oh my gosh, holy smokes, slow down. And so there's ongoing discussion about why can't an LPC or an LSF or an LCSF, someone who is licensed and regulated by the state, be able to provide that care. And so this is something I get really excited about, and I will stop rambling, but there are ongoing discussions from the policy standpoint. And like you said, the devil's in the details. Man, insurance people love details.
Yes. I do think we're getting to the end. I'm going to pass it off for final words.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you to those of you who have been on this journey a very long time. I know many of you are in this room because this has personally impacted you, and you can feel that importance. And I hope that even if you haven't had to go through one of those experiences, you can understand the urgency and the need around mental health. And us, as well as the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, we've done this in partnership with everybody in the community, building off the work that JFNCS did with GSU, right? Continuing that work, because it is not stagnant. It is ever changing, as I think you've all illuminated here today. So I will say that if you are
a fund holder with the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, you are able to use your donor advised fund to support any of these amazing 501c3s in this room. We'll send you an entire resource list. Even if you're not a fund holder, you could become one, or there are other ways that you can make donations. The important thing is, and we will share out more of the study that was done that Faye talked about in the beginning, so you can see where there are additional opportunities to systemically change and support what is happening in mental health and well-being. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for flowing with the pivot of today. That is just, I think, examples of how life is these days, right? Every day is new, every day is different. We appreciate you, we see you, and please feel free to stay to get to know everybody in the room. And just thank you to all of you for being here. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Good to see you.